Life in eastern suburban Melbourne in the 1950s was fairly stable. At this time, Melbourne's population was less than 2 million. Sir Robert Menzies was Prime Minister for the entire decade, and Sir Henry Bolte was Premier of Victoria from the mid-1950s through until the early 70s. Even the footy was pretty stable. And it was great, if you barracked for Melbourne. Melbourne Football Club won the premiership in 1955, 56, 57, 59 and 60, only missing in 58 when they were runners-up to Collingwood. Arguably, the two most exciting things to happen in this part of the world during the 1950s were 1. The 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games, and 2. The introduction of television at about the same time. This video will be focusing on Box Hill and Vermont in the 1950s, and the birds and animals that could be found there, and then contrasting with how things are today with these two areas. As can be seen in this aerial photo, Box Hill in the 1950s was fairly heavily suburbanised. The same area seen today looks very similar. Vermont, on the other hand, in the 1950s, was largely still rural, with lots of orchards and farms and a bit of bush. Today it is very suburban, but it still retains some areas of bushland. So what does this mean for the wildlife of these two areas, then and now? In the 1950s in Box Hill, the likely range of native fauna that could be seen would not have been greatly different from that which can be seen today. Common animals would still be brushtail and ringtail possums, a range of frogs could still be found, and the odd snake would occasionally intrude into backyards. Common birds would have been magpies and noisy miners, and ravens, often called crows. But there still would have been regular sightings in parks and gardens of many birds that these days would be viewed as being unusual or even rare. Some of these would include such birds as the spotted pardalote, yellow-rumped thornbill, willy wagtail, blue wren, brown goshawk, and the white-plumed honeyeater. Fortunately, some historic pest species also appear to have largely moved on, i.e. sparrows and starlings, but we still have lots of other pests. Interestingly, there are actually some species that were considered unusual to rare back in the 1950s that can be seen more often these days in the general Box Hill area. These include flocks of little corellas, seen in very large flocks in autumn, pied currawongs, crested pigeons, previously considered a dry country bird, but the millennium drought appears to have encouraged them to move south, and of course the rainbow lorikeet, now probably our most common native bird. An animal that could be added to this list would be the grey-headed flying fox, or fruit bat, that is now a regular sight over much of eastern Melbourne in the evening. In Vermont, in the 50s, things were a little different. Although much of the land had been cleared for farming, there were still many pockets of bushland remaining, and these were still, by and large, connected to larger patches of bushland found further east. This meant that animals like echidnas and bandicoots, goannas, wombats, and koalas could still occasionally be seen. Kangaroos and wallabies could also be seen, and somewhat surprisingly, they can still be occasionally seen today, but sadly, most of the other animals have disappeared. Possums are also still with us in Vermont, along with their shy, smaller cousin, the sugar glider. Birds, being generally more mobile than the animals, were pretty much still the same in both Box Hill and Vermont in the 1950s. Today, however, Vermont has more regular sightings of some of the more timid birds than can be found in Box Hill. Such birds as silver eyes, or robins, or red-browed finches. This is mainly because of the type of vegetation still to be found in parts of Vermont that is no longer found in Box Hill. Most of our little birds are either honey eaters, such as the yellow-faced honeyeater or the scarlet honeyeater, or they are seed and insect eaters, such as the white-browed scrub wren, the brown thornbill, grey fantail, or fairy wren. All of these little birds prefer relatively dense bush. This not only provides food for them, but also affords them some cover and protection from attack from predators. Vermont still has these sorts of areas, although not as much as it used to. If you wish to attract small birds to your garden, then some local native plants that you might like to consider would include such plants as correa, Spiridium or dusty miller, Leptospermum or tea tree, Cassinia or dogwood, various hakeas, acacias or wattles if you like, daisy bushes, Olearia, Indigofera, Hopgoodenia, and Banksias, although there are many others. We are fortunate to have so many local birds and animals still to be seen. If you wish to see them in the future, it is up to us to preserve their habitat.